Well, do I have a fun video for you today? How much XRP should you have accumulated in your investing journey so far at specific age groups? So I'm going to get into all the calculations, all the numbers that I've been kind of assessing here. And at the end of the video, I'm going to give you a golden nugget of information that you can actually take and action today that could literally change the outcome of this bull run that's about to happen at any moment. Fingers crossed. But before we get into it, I want to let you know of something that's happening for the first time ever on this channel. On June the 19th, 2025, I'm hosting my first ever live keynote. There's going to be a keynote section and then a meetup section afterwards where I'm only reserving spots for 30 to 50 people in London, again, on June 19th. The time and the location haven't been fully booked in, but I've put a form in the description of this video. If you're interested in attending and you're open to coming, put your name on that list and I'll email you as soon as the tickets become available. It's going to be completely free for you. It's going to be an amazing chance for us all to meet each other, talk about crypto, and just have an overall good time. All I need is your name, your email address, and whether you're interested in coming to this event. I'll prioritize everyone that's on this list in that first round of emails that I send out. Hear me out on the thought process here of this video, because I know we've got that kind of XRP rich list, and you can see the table. Maybe I've put it on screen somewhere here. And you can see how the top 1% of crypto holders, how many asset or XRP holders, how many XRP they hold to be in the 10%, the 30%, the 40%, so on and so forth. And, you know, as I look through that, I think this is really cool information, but it's not really tangible. You can't really do anything about it. It's just kind of like, oh yeah, cool. And there's nothing really else that goes into that. So I wanted to dive a little bit deeper. But first we have to make a couple of assumptions. So the first assumption is, and it is kind of a big assumption, and, you know, forgive me, I have to draw the line somewhere. I think most people's desire is to be in the top 10% in earning capacity in general, right? I think top 10% is highly achievable for almost everyone in a very specific audience like this. Obviously, the top 10% isn't normal, but I think 10% is achievable. Even if you've got a small portfolio right now, you can work towards the top 10%. It's a bit easier. I have made these calculations with the help of AI, of course, saying that the ideal target for people in XRP is to be in the top 10%. Right? That's where everyone wants to be. In order to calculate how much XRP you need, I needed to calculate what the averages would be for people who are already in the top 10%, because that's going to be like the control. What I had to look for was the top 10% of earners. And then another assumption, if you're in that top 10% of earners, if you then invest 10% of your net worth into XRP, how many XRP would you have? And if you do those calculations, that sets the barrier as to where the token value amount is to be in the top 10% in the world. And so I might have explained that not so well, but we're going to get into that. And I've got a lovely little graph here to show you. So I think we just get straight into it, right? We'll just get into the numbers. Then I'm going to give you that golden nugget at the end, which is actually going to be really helpful. In order to be in the top 10% of XRP holders, you only have to have 2,500 to 3,000 XRP tokens. I'm assuming that basically everyone has that many. So much so that it calls into question, hang on a second, if the top 10% of holders have 2,500 to 3,000 tokens, how is that possible? Because that's not much. Well, you are disregarding the idea that there are so many wallets out there with dust in them. There's probably more wallets with dust than there are people with actual holdings in those wallets. And so it's kind of hard to kind of estimate in that way. But the top 10%, regardless, is 2,500 to 3,000 XRP tokens. To be in the top 10% by net worth at age 20, you have to have $281,500 as your net worth. That is, I mean, that seems like quite a far stretch for someone in their 20s. But nevertheless, if you want to be in the top 10%, that's how much you got to have. Because we're then going to extrapolate. If you have 10% of your net worth in XRP, then we know how many XRP tokens would get you truly into the top 10%, and disregarding all of those dust accounts, right? And so if you're in your 30s, $711,000. In your 40s, it'd be $1.31 million in your net worth. At age 50, $2.63 million. At age 60, it's $3 million. These are all representative of the top 10% of people in terms of net worth. And so we have to also draw the line on what the price of XRP is. The price is going to fluctuate. I've gone for $2.50 because that's what it was recently. And it's a nice, easy number. if we take the 90th percentile of net worthers and assume that 10% of their wealth is allocated specifically in XRP, and then you divide that by today's price, or that $2.50 price, you get to figure out an exact target amount of XRP per age group that would put you in the top 10%, truly. And what you would need to do from 2,500 to 3,000 XRP in terms of a multiplier that will get you to that top 1% for your age category. Are you ready? If you're liking this, subscribe to the channel. It helps tremendously, and like it and share it if this would be of interest to anyone else in your life. If you're 20 years old, listen up, young'uns. In order to be in the top 10% in terms of net worth, you have to have $281,500. If you allocate 10% of your net worth into XRP, that means you would have $28,155 in your portfolio, meaning 11,300 XRP tokens. So if you're in your 20s right now and you have more than 11,300 XRP tokens, you are in the top 10% and you are doing fantastically. If you've got less than that, I don't blame you because you're 20. Like, do your best, work your hardest, get as much money as you can. Because what we're talking about here is if you allocate 10% of your net worth. I know many of you cheeky people in here, you haven't just allocated 10% of your net worth, right? This is more achievable the higher the percentage of your contribution based on your net worth. But financially, from a financial advice perspective, not giving you financial advice, but whenever you engage with an exchange or some sort of online crypto thing, they don't want you to be spending or investing more than 10% of your even your salary every year. And so I've just kept it at 10% to keep it simple. But let's move on. If you're 30 years old, your net worth target should be $711,400, meaning you should have $71,140 allocated in XRP, meaning that you would need 28,500 XRP to be in the top 10% of XRP holders, and you would need an 11x starting from 2,500 XRP to get there, an 11x. And so really what I think is, it's my vision that we're probably likely to see a 4x, maybe a little bit more in the rest of this bull run. You know, if you're looking for an 11x from here in this bull run, I don't think really that's going to happen to take you into the top 10% if you are lying on 2,500 tokens. But you've got to accumulate more. Like you've got to accumulate more if you're below that 28,500 XRP. So if you're 40 years old, your net worth is $1.31 million, should be, to be in the top 10%, meaning you need $131,000 in your XRP portfolio, which is 52,500 XRP. Now, if you're 50, which I know many of you in this audience are, you're in that range of 40 to 50 to 60 years old. If you're in the 50-year-old category, to be in the top 10% of net worth, you would have to have $2.6 million as your net worth. Your allocation into XRP would have to be $263,000, meaning you need over 100,000 XRP tokens to be in that top 10%, 105,000 to be exact. If you're 60 years old, you need a $3 million net worth, which means $300,000 in XRP specifically to be in that top 10% of dollar allocation, which is 120,000 XRP. I've rounded those up to the nearest 100 XRP just for simplicity there, but you can see how this breakdown is quite illuminating. There's lots of different variable factors and stuff, so I've had to draw the line somewhere, but I hope it was of interest to you just to see where you fit in and how much you've got to grow from here to get to your goals. And you might have 1% goals, and that's completely fine, and that's great, good for you. But I think for the majority of people, these are numbers to be working towards for every age group, to know that you're in the top 10%. I think it's just nice to have those numbers. Now, to get into that golden nugget of information that I was talking about earlier, in many ways, this title of this video has been crafted in such a way that I know it's going to get some views because it's quite an exciting topic, and it's indicative of the way people's brains actually work in crypto. And that is, what price of these assets do I need for the amount of tokens I've got to get the most amount of money possible, right? That's the key part. You're essentially viewing content on YouTube and you're maximizing for money. Of course, we maximize every action we do for money because money is important. But I'll tell you, there is an asset that's actually more valuable than money, and it's time. And so when I look at this, I think, wow, this is quite a lot of distraction. It's quite exciting. It's all dopamine release, but in reality, it's a distraction. We're looking at $10,000, $50,000 for XRP and just getting distracted with all of that. But if you do things in a slightly different way, think about things in a slightly different order, and you optimize for time, the money will come, but you would have prioritized your time. And that's a way better situation to be in. So this is how I do it with my clients. And I've worked with over 100 students at this point. Like one-on-one, I've seen what people's issues are and I've solved those issues. So I've gone through this a lot. Let's say you've got someone who's 40 years old. Let's go back to that chart. You've got someone who's 40 years old. They're in the top 10% of XRP allocation. They've got the 10% amount of XRP. But when they actually come to it and they look at what their goals are for their life, and I like to say, if anyone was handed an opportunity right now, would you take 90% fulfillment from your life and 90% happiness right now? Or would you be willing to sacrifice years to achieve that extra 10%? Most people would say, take the 90. Thank you very much. And what I have seen in the program material and as I've worked with people is that people don't know where the 90% is. What is that number that gets you to 90% of basically where you want to be for the rest of your life and saving you loads of time on the back end, not being distracted by YouTube and crypto and markets and stuff. Most people would take the offer of that 90% that's just handed to them. And so if you know where that 90% is, you can start making those types of decisions that change your life. And so you might be aiming to be in the 10% as a 40-year-old with 52,500 XRP. But in reality, when you extrapolate that out and look at the price required to get to your, let's say the person, all they need to retire for the rest of their lives is $3 million, right? That's all they need for the rest of their lives. They might be able to achieve $3 million at a $5 XRP. And in which case, does that not add the question to your brain? What am I chasing for extra when I know exactly what I need and it can happen very quickly? The idea that it could happen at $5 instead of, being distracted and waiting for a $10,000 XRP and you're holding on because money. Yeah, I just want more money. That is what it looks like to maximize for money. What I'm suggesting here is if you realize you only need a $5 XRP, you can start maximizing for time and optimizing your strategy for time. You might achieve your goals far sooner. So instead of looking at it as this is how much XRP you need by certain ages, look at it more along the lines of, what is the destination number for me? Why have I come to the conclusion of that number? And I've got whole methodologies and frameworks for all of this thinking. But that should be what you're optimizing for, that number. And so you can then discover, that number can be achieved far sooner than I expected. And therefore, that has major repercussions on your decision-making moving forward. If you can just figure out that destination number, I think that's the nugget of information that you need. Then you can start calculating what price point you would need for XRP to achieve that number. And if you want to go even further and make this even easier to achieve, what is 90% of that number? And what price does you need to achieve for XRP to hit that 90%? It's just worth thinking about. I just think it's it's so much fun to think about all this stuff. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you're interested in attending the first ever live keynote on June the 19th in London, fill out the form in the description. You can travel to it. I don't know why anyone would travel to London for this. It's going to be like a 2, maybe 3 hour thing, like a prolonged lunch break or something. It's going to be good fun. I hope to see you there. Register below. It's absolutely free. Stay emotionless, and I'll see you in the next one.